Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to begin our second morning session with Shawn Klein. Shawn is a professor of philosophy, teaches philosophy at Rockford College in Illinois. Rockford University, excuse me. Where he also contributes to the program of the Center for Ethics and Entrepreneurship that Stephen Hicks founded. Shawn got his doctorate from Arizona State University in philosophy and has developed, among his other topics, he's developed a kind of specialty in the ethics of sports, which many people outside the philosophy world don't know. There is a rather large body of discussion, conferences, papers, and Shawn is making a name for himself in that field, and we'll be talking today about one of the broader issues regarding play and the understanding of what play is. And after 3 days of work, I think it's a great topic for us. So, Shawn.
Thank you, David. Thank you. And as part of that, I run a blog called sportsethicist.com, where I also have podcasts occasionally, every couple of weeks or so, talking about different issues that arise in the ethics and philosophy of sport, and sometimes just talking about the Red Sox winning the World Series, too. So, but today's talk is much broader than sport, although many of my examples will be sport. It's really more about the idea of play itself, more broadly understood. Now, children love to play. Here's my son playing doing probably his favorite thing in the world, playing with cars and chalk. So he's drawing a little cityscape that he will then use his cars on and go to Starbucks with. So he draws a little Starbucks and goes there. So children love to play, and so do adults. So here's a picture that my wife will kill me if she ever finds out I used. So Stephen, don't tell her. So a little cosplay, which is short for costume play, and so this was a Halloween outfit, but we got dressed up in Doctor Who characters for that, and so adults like to play too. Now, what we play and how we play is different, but the why is usually the same. We play because we like it. Play adds value to our lives. Now, the generic benefits of play are likely familiar. Psychological research suggests many important developmental benefits from play for children. Play seems to be involved in helping to develop imagination, creativity, memory, problem solving, and language skills. Some studies have shown that kids who play pretend together have improved cognitive and linguistic performances. Other studies suggest links between increased ability to self-regulate and frequent play. And play also seems to help children understand themselves and others. For social play, children need to see the differences between themselves and others, and they need to be aware of the needs and concerns of those that they play with. And so it helps them to understand and see those differences and reinforce them. Now, for these reasons and more, play has important roles in educational theories, such as those put forward by Montessori, Dewey, you can boo there, and Piaget. And Piaget, I think it was, who said, sometimes it's attributed to Montessori, but I couldn't find a citation for it. And actually, many people seem to indicate that it was more from Piaget. The quote, that play is the work of the child. I don't know if anyone's heard that phrase before. And it's one that I love, given my focus here. And so these benefits, though, aren't really restricted to children. Right? Research also suggests that these benefits from play continue into adulthood. So this is a picture of a cubicle setup in offices at Google, and these are just a bunch of Nerf guns. And so at some point, I imagine those get used. And so in addition to the benefits that children also get from play, adult play also seems to help in other ways. It helps to relieve stress. It helps to deepen social and interpersonal bonds. We choose to play and what we play. And so the experience is the opposite of stress-causing conditions, which are usually external and imposed. So when we choose to play, it's something that we choose to engage in. And so even though it might be, competitive or stressful in the game itself in terms of, or am I going to win or losing here, but it's because you've chosen it. It's a different kind of experience other than one that might be externally imposed on you. And so it's not surprising then that we see the proliferation of things like play therapy for some kinds of mental health issues, or that we hear about businesses like Google that encourage an environment of play to create a more creative and productive workforce. Google, for example, also has areas for playing, right? So they have areas designated for playing, but they also try to create a playful atmosphere with conference rooms designed like subway cars, apparently, ladders connecting different floor levels, all right? So it's to create a more playful atmosphere for them. And these benefits are wonderful. It's great. I'd love to work in an environment like that. When I worked years ago in a different life, I used to work at Digital, which doesn't exist anymore. And it was just a sea of cubicles. You'd walk in, just a sea of cubicles in the buildings. Now they got as playful as they did by some. There was the blue cubicle room, and then you might have had the green cubicle room. And that was about the extent of it. And it was not an inviting, spontaneous, creative atmosphere. And that's why we have Google and we don't have Digital. And so these benefits are wonderful, but I think they miss something important. I don't think they get at the real ultimate reasons of why we play and why it's really valuable to us. So let me suggest an analogy that I think can help. We know that having friends is important for mental health. Friends help us cope with adversity. Friends offer us an opportunity for psychological visibility. Friends also provide us with material benefits. How many of us have gotten a job interview or similar opportunity because our friend put in a good word for us or something along that lines? But these benefits don't really, I think, explain fully or primarily why I'm friends with my best friend Joe. So this is a shot of us at Wrigley Field. Although we're both Red Sox fans, we were at Wrigley, so he thought he should buy a Cubs hat. So, and we don't have any fear of meeting them in the World Series. So that joke goes over a little better here than it does when I make it in Rockford. Except for the White Sox fans, they laugh at it. So now Joe and I are friends because of the specific and individual values that we share and enjoy together. We choose to spend time together because we want to be in each other's company. We do a podcast on Boston sports together because it's fun. We lend an ear when the other needs to vent or share good news because we care about each other. And when I think about my friendship with Joe, I don't think of the benefits of friendship. I think of the specific values embodied by my friend. The value that we primarily are concerned with in friendship is the concrete individual person. It's important to understand and identify the general benefits of friendship, but they don't really explain the immediate basis for one's particular friendships. And I think this is the same with play. It has important instrumental values for our lives and society, but that's not really the immediate basis for why we play and why we find it valuable. We play because we value the play directly. It's this direct value that I'm going to be concerned with today. Now first, I want to look at play in Rand's fiction and nonfiction. And this is about the most playful picture I could find for Rand. And so this will be somewhat quick, because there's not a lot in Rand or even subsequent work in Objectivism on play. Things like career, friendship, romantic relationships are oft discussed as playing important, if not central roles in our lives, as they should. But when play is mentioned or seen at all, it's usually presented as mere recreation or leisure. It's usually typically something that a child is doing, but when adults engage in it, it's really for downtime or as an escape. It's peripheral. It's secondary. Dagny and Francisco play tennis as youth, but there's no mention of that, of them ever playing as adults. An adult, Francisco, plays with marbles in the hotel room with Dagny. I tried to find a still from the movie from part 2, I think it was, or part 1, that would have been. And I couldn't find one. But, right, so he plays with marbles there in his pajamas, but he does so, quote, absently, indifferently. He's playing out of a kind of restlessness. It's an escape from his image as a useless playboy. Here, playing marbles, he can be skillful and purposeful without undermining his commitment to the strike. But we're meant to see that if Francisco wasn't on strike, He'd be putting his skill and purposes to work in the world, creating value, and not playing marbles in his PJs. Now, in The Fountainhead, at one point, Rourke is talking to a potential client who likes to play badminton with his architects. And Rourke tells him, kind of somewhat bemused, while that building's being put up, Mr. Sutton, I wouldn't have any time to play anyway. Right, so play is secondary. It's recreation. It's not important. And given Rand's literary theory, the absence of the heroes playing speaks volumes. She chooses never to show Rourke doing a crossword puzzle or Reardon playing golf. Who does she show? There's a bit of a spot quiz. Who does she show doing a crossword puzzle? No. What? Someone say it? Thought I heard Keating. Keating is shown at one point doing crossword puzzle. Now, lest you think I have some sort of encyclopedic Talmudic mind for the books, I have the Objectivist research CD, so I was able to find that way. And so who does she show? She shows Keating playing with doing a crossword puzzle. And who plays golf in The Fountainhead and talks a lot about golf all the time? Anyone know? I don't know how much he talks about it, but Alva Scarrett talks about it a lot. All right. And so it's easy to conclude that Rand has a disdain for games and for play. But I think there's a little bit more to the story than that. Now, throughout Atlas Shrugged, there are a number of instances of characters referring to a kind of playing games. Now, these are confidence games, manipulation games, people gaming the system. Now, after the disturbance at Reardon's mill, the wet nurse says to Reardon, "Did you think I'd play that kind of game?" Now, the problem with the kind of game that the wet nurse is talking about, and that the con games and the political games mentioned throughout Atlas, is not that people are playing games. The problem is that the games are rigged. The problem is that the dice are loaded in these games, and that there are no objective rules to these games. Another sort of way of looking at it is the adult characters in Rand's novels who do play games are typically of the leisure class. Right? Games like golf are used as status symbols. Right? That's where Guy Franco might have been talking about golf at that point. It was a way to be seen. They're status symbols. Now, in contrast, in the scene where Rourke is thinking about the monadnock, I don't know if I'm quite saying that right, monadnock. It's one of those ones that you say in your head all the time, but then when you go to say it out loud, did that come out right? So Monadnock Valley Resort, he thinks about creating pools and tennis courts that are about private pleasure, not for exhibitionists or for being seen in the right company. Playing tennis for one's pleasure, then, is not the problem. It's treating it as a status symbol that's a problem. So I think these examples suggest that the use and discussion of games in Rand's fiction is not usually about the games themselves, but about something else. She's not focused on the status of games qua games. Now, the closest Rand gets to a more direct discussion of games is in her essay on an open letter to Boris Spassky. And in this letter, she discusses the game of chess. And this is anthologized in Philosophy Who Needs It, if you haven't read it. Now, the discussion here, too, I think is mixed. Rand starts off saying that, quote, games are an important part of man's life. They are a necessary rest. And that they offer, quote, us an opportunity to see certain human skills develop to a level of perfection. She notes that chess demonstrates the metaphysical absolutism of reality with which the players deal. As such, it provides lessons in the laws of identity and causality. But Rand is also suspicious of games here. She worries that they create an illusion of action and struggle. She says, chess removes the motor of intellectual effort, the question, what for, and leaves a somewhat frightening phenomenon, intellectual effort devoid of purpose. Games as recreation or the pause that refresh seem to be okay, but if too much of one's focus and effort is directed at games, one is escaping from the world rather than engaging it. All that intellectual effort that goes into mastering the skills necessary for games, particularly a game like chess, is suggested that it's somewhat misdirected or wasteful. Games are without purpose, so the effort is wasted. Now, another significant comment on play is in the essay Comprachicos. Here, Rand is critical of progressive education, in part because it leaves kids to play spontaneously. Play, she says, is the opposite of learning. Play seems to be regarded as, at best, a waste of time. Kids, it seems, shouldn't be wasting time playing. They should be learning, as if the two are always distinct. So the picture we get of play and of games in Rand is mixed. There's a great deal of suspicion about games and play, but there's also a potential opening. Play maybe a way to think about it is that play seems to occupy a space like charity in Rand's thought. It's acceptable in the proper context, but not something central or all that important. And so for children and adults alike, play is at best a break, a pause that refreshes. Now I think, though, a better understanding of play can show us that it's not a wasteful activity, and that the value of play is more than just a respite from more important things. Now, theories of play go back to at least Plato and Socrates, but contemporary theories about play typically start with Johann Huizinga. I doubt I'm saying that quite properly, but and this is the cover of his classic Homo Ludens, which roughly translates as man the player, playing man. Now, Huizinga sees civilization and culture as at once emerging from a kind of play and being a kind of play. And in his work, he develops what has, in some ways, become the standard object account of play. And what I mean by object account of play is that play is seen as a kind of thing or activity with distinct characteristics. And this is in contrast to some more recent views about play as something what we might call attitudinal, that any activity could be play if the appropriate kinds of attitudes are present. Now, obviously, I don't have time to do justice to all the views here. So let me just briefly explain some of the typical characteristics offered by the object view of play, and then say a few things about the attitudinal view. Now, play is something freely engaged in. It can't be forced or obligated. Play is also, it's an expression of our freedom. It's a way of feeling free by accepting arbitrary rules and conditions and boundaries. And by choosing to start or stop playing. We can, let's play. Okay, I'm done, and stop, right? So it's an expression of one's freedom. Play is extraordinary. It's a kind of step out into another world with its own rules and boundaries. It's separate from other kinds of activities, such as work. Right? There's a special time for play. Right? There was recess time. Remember that? Playtime, play dates. And much of play has its own sense of time. And anyone who sat down to play, like an intensive computer game, something like SimCity or Civilization, those kinds of sort of infinity games, you can start playing it, and hours later, it's dark out, you haven't had dinner, it's the middle of the night. What the hell happened? Right? So it sort of has its own time. Or consider that it takes nearly 3 hours to play an hour of American football. Right? So that time that's in the game is different from the way we sort of mark time in the real world. Play has its own space, sometimes clearly marked off as in the boundaries of a playground. Huizinga has a really interesting comparison between sacred ground and playgrounds. Right? And so you take ordinary spaces and you mark them off as special. So it could be the fences of a cemetery or the white lines of a football field. And there's almost a real palpable difference as you step into it. Even now, as an adult, when I step over into the bark mulch where the playground is or the play structure is where the kids play, there's a sense of a feeling of difference even now as an adult. And of course, enjoyment, pleasures is an obvious part of play, that people enjoy it. Autotelic activities are those activities which are ends in themselves. That is, they are engaged in for no external reason or purpose. The activity is its own justification, meaning, or purpose. And most theories of play regard play as autotelic, as something that's only engaged in for its own sake. So if one is doing some activity that we might typically call play, but if they're doing it for some other purpose, to earn money, to learn a skill, to get famous, then one is not really playing. They're doing something else. And this is connected also to the idea that there's a lack of productiveness or purpose in play. If play is autotelic, then it can't be engaged in for productive purposes. On this view, external purposes, including the pursuit of material values and interests, can have no role in play. Renowned play theorist Roger Calais says of professional athletes, quote, "It's clear that they are not players, but workers." Right. So that, I guess now we could put college athletes in there as well. But now, so the attitudinal view claims that we can't really define play as a kind, just as a distinct kind of activity with a certain set of characteristics. So we can just go tick off, look at an activity, tick off that it has these characteristics, and call it play. They say, look, play is more of the attitude or the stance of the player, not the activity itself. The play attitude is one where one voluntarily accepts the arbitrary boundaries or constraints for the sake of playing. Now, many of the aspects of the object view are still here, but they're internalized. An activity can be play if the individual freely accepts the constraints of the activity and does so for the purposes of enjoyment or fun. So in this way, any activity can become a game, can be fun, can be play. And so here's a comic strip of the myth of Sisyphus. So he's got the rock that he's pushing up the hill, and so he gets to the top. Achievement unlocked. Just keep rolling. Roll the boulder up 5,000 times. Right? So he's like, all right. He gets his little sticker. He's all excited. He puts it on, and then the rock boulder goes down, and it's time to do it again. So by making a game out of this, by having an attitude of accepting these arbitrary conditions of rolling the rock up, having it go down, and doing it again, it becomes a game. The repetition is no longer tedious. It's no longer a punishment. It's something that you're engaged in and enjoying. I don't know if I'd recommend this as a game, but it's one way to approach it. Now, many contemporary play theories have moved to something like the attitudinal view because it seems better able to capture the broader sense of play that makes better sense of the way we use the concept, especially when we talk about things like play therapy or professional athletes or professional gamers or the use of play in work environments. Now, before moving on to talk about objectivism play, as a philosopher, I feel I need to note that I've ignored an important distinction here, the distinction between play and games. These are obviously closely related, but they're not identical. They're not the same thing. But nevertheless, for my purposes today in my discussion, the differences aren't really relevant or important. But I didn't want you to think that I was just papering over and eliding that distinction altogether. So that most of you probably don't care, but I needed to say that. So now let us turn then to objectivism and see what sense we can make of the value of play. Now first, I'll explain how play is something that can help us to understand and value the cardinal values. Second, I'll try to locate the play in one's hierarchy of values. And then lastly, I want to challenge the idea that play must be autotelic and thus unproductive. Now the cardinal values identified by Rand as reason, purpose, self-esteem, or self, as it's sometimes put, are values that support and sustain our capacities to engage in the pursuit of the values of our lives. We need reason to understand the nature of the values we seek and how to produce them. We need purpose to keep ourselves focused on our goals and the values of that those goals achieve. We need self-esteem both as a matter of recognizing for whom these values are ultimately sought and that one is worthy of the value he or she seeks. Now, for more explication on that and more complete presentation, I recommend going to Logical Structure of Objectivism, which is on the Atlas Society website, which, right, I'll just presume that you're all familiar with that and move on. Now, these are cardinal values in the sense that they are values by which we triangulate the activities of our lives. Right? So that is that they help us to identify if an activity is valuable for us and where it might fit in our value hierarchy. Does the activity support or exercise one's rational capacity? Does it have a purpose? Does that purpose fit in with other values and activities in your life? How does that activity connect to and support my interests, my happiness, my life? Now, I think it's through these values that we can see why work, or better, career, is such an important value in objectivism. On one level, work is the primary way that one produces the material values that he or she needs for life. Valuing work consciously is a way of valuing the production of material values. But one's work is also a spiritual matter. Reason, purpose, and self are served by and instantiated by work. A long-term career that one invests in and develops requires reason. One has to use reason to choose from many different opportunities and paths. One has to use reason to perform her work well. One has to consider how these choices fit in with the bigger picture of one's life and one's other values. Purpose is valued by attending to one's career, and one's career is part of how one achieves his purposes. The choice of one's career is highly personal. What are your traits and capacities? What are you good at, and what do you enjoy? We work to fulfill our material needs, but we also work to express our identity and to engage in activities that we find enjoyable and rewarding. Work is thus an important way that one meets, fulfills, and affirms the cardinal values of reason, purpose, and self. But what about play? Can it relate to the cardinal values in this way? In Rand's journals, she writes, "Joy is an end in itself. My pattern of enjoyment is I'm good, and if this thing has given me enjoyment, then it is good." Now, as long as the activity is not itself something that is a disvalue or harmful, such as heroin, then the fact that an activity brings you joy or pleasure is reason enough for that activity to be counted as a good. As Rand is recognizing, the joy, independent of the activity, is itself important. Joy is a good feeling. It's a positive emotion. While not identical to, it is part of what we mean by well-being or flourishing. We have a basic need to feel these positive emotions of joy, excitement, pleasure, and so on. The lack of these experiences would make one's life dismal and empty. The psychologist Brian Sutton Smith says, quote, "The opposite of play isn't work, it's depression." Moreover, we see a correlation between cognitive dysfunction on one hand and negative emotional states like depression on the other. So having positive emotional experiences can help our cognitive capacities to function better. Now, play connects into the value of reason in two main ways. First, play itself requires the exercise and development of our cognitive abilities. The more sophisticated the play, such as one sees in chess, football, War of Warcraft, the more important one's intellectual and cognitive abilities are for success. Second, the joy one experiences in play is a way of valuing reason. Since we need regular positive experiences like joy for our reason and cognitive capacity to function well, by playing and experiencing this joy, we support and sustain reason. We enjoy play because we are engaged in something we have chosen to do and are successful at this activity. This both depends on and deepens a robust cognitive capacity. It depends on it because successful play requires the exploitation of a wide range of cognitive abilities. It deepens it because it creates a positive feedback loop for enjoying the use of our minds to create something pleasurable. Play connects to the value of self and self-esteem in similar ways. The experience of joy tells us that we are worthy of life and the values we seek. But play also values the self because play is an expression of the self. What we choose to play and how we play is tied into our identity and our sense of who we are. Like choosing to play chess is an expression of a kind of intellectuality, a mental preference or sense of yourself, versus choosing to play racquetball, which is more of a physical, maybe social part of yourself, versus solitaire or Sudoku, which is going to be more individual, also intellectual. And play also gives us a place to feel efficacious. By playing, we can experience ourselves engaged in the world and doing something. We make things happen when we play. You level up in some kinds of games by achieving things like, as Sisyphus did, scoring a goal, right, which hopefully the U.S. will do several times tonight. And this sense of agency and effectiveness is essential for our sense of self and its worthiness. As Rand noted in the Spassky letter, play is an opportunity to develop our skills to perfection. But in her Spassky letter, Rand was also suspicious that this agency wasn't real because games themselves are artificial. Certainly, leveling up in World of Warcraft isn't nearly as important or significant as inventing written metal or creating the iPad, for a more real-life example. But nevertheless, the sense of having done something, even just in a game, is real and can have similar psychological effects. Indeed, the artificial nature of games helps us to identify and focus our agency. Because of the clearly delimited rules and conditions of a game and the fact that we play them over and over again, we are more clearly able to see that it was our agency that brought something about. In real life, there are many complicating factors in trying to identify the causal factors for success. A CEO is hired, implements a new plan. The company does well. Was this primarily due to his plan or just rising economic conditions? It's hard to know. We don't redo that again and again to see. We could run it the other way. The CEO's new plan is implemented and the company fails or does worse. Was the plan bad or was it just a bad economy? It's hard to know. But in the artificial conditions of a repeated game, we are much better suited to say definitively, yes, that was me. I did that. A game provides measurable results of our actions as well as clear and direct feedback. A move either works or not. And over a short period of time, we can experience concretely our improvement. I can see the statistics as my Sudoku completion times get better. Right? Or as I complete more and more challenging boards. And know that I'm doing better. So even though the game conditions are artificial, they are a source of these important psychological features of success. It can take years to write a book, develop a revolutionary drug, or produce a faster algorithm for searching a database. And harder still to know if such efforts are truly successful. It's very hard to see and experience the success, the achievement over these long-term projects. The smaller, more immediate, measurable, and concrete successes of play and games are important for reaffirming to oneself that they are capable of and worthy of that success. These little successes are valuable in the moment, but also for helping to sustain one for the longer-term projects. So here play seems to reaffirm reason and self. But play isn't supposed to have any purpose. So how does it affirm the value of purpose? Now there's a fascinating paradox to play. On one hand, it's not serious. It's not real. The things you do in play don't usually have any meaning outside of playing. Try making sense of a double play in baseball outside the context of baseball. What are you doing? It only makes sense in the game, and it's only valuable when you're playing the game. Outside of it, it's completely not serious, right, or useful. And so in this sense, this is the sense in which I think most people mean when they talk about play as lacking any kind of purpose. But on the other hand, within the context of playing, one needs to take it seriously. The emotional rewards of playing do not accrue if one is not serious about it. Now, as a father of a young child, I often sit on the floor and push car toys around on a rug. Other than the pleasure of spending quality time with my son, the activity is quite boring. My son, however, is fully engaged in and enjoying a play world of police cars rushing to the scene of some terrible accident. All right. Not quite what he's doing there, but I couldn't find a picture of him doing that. I was up way too late trying to find a picture of that through all my photo stream, and I just never found it. But this was close enough. Now, so what's the difference? Well, Sam, even while recognizing it's not real, is able to take the play seriously. He's able to experience the car and their movements as meaningful. For me, the activity itself is not serious, and so it's hard to find its meaning. My purpose is quality time with my son, not the play itself. The playing of cars itself has no inner purpose for me. For Sam, though, the play does have a purpose and a meaning. It is serious, non-serious for him. Right? Now, Rand seems to recognize this paradox when she notes the metaphysical absolutism of chess. The pieces and their moves are clearly defined. There are no exceptions or gray areas. To play chess and play it well, one has to accept these rules, man-made and arbitrary, as metaphysical absolutes. You cannot move the king except in the ways that you're, not the king, the knight. You can only move 3 up, 2 side. And this is part of why I think she is suspicious of games. We seem to have to treat the non-serious as serious. Now, my point is that within the context of playing, there are purposes that have to be valued and affirmed for the play to be meaningful and enjoyable. One cannot really play without taking it seriously and valuing it. If you don't take seriously the rules of running to first when you hit the ball, then you are not playing baseball. In other words, to play, one has to play with purpose. The what for is a deep part of play. All the moves and actions of play have a purpose in the play. You can't play without understanding and accepting the play purpose. So in these ways, play helps to meet, fulfill, affirm the cardinal values of reason, purpose, and self. But is it a significant and important way of doing this? That is, where does it fit in the hierarchy of values? We have lots of spiritual and social values. Some of the traditionally important ones in objectivist writings are career, education, art, philosophy, friendship, economic exchanges, and so on. These are higher in the hierarchy of one's values for two main reasons. One, these values reflect universal needs. Humans in all walks of life have the needs that career, education, philosophy, and so on fulfill. These values are brought to life in individual ways by individuals at different times and in different cultures. But people in all walks of life have these needs and seek the values to fulfill them. Two, these values capture and integrate the widest breadth of human experience and value. That is, they require the use of all or most of our human capacities and do so over vast chunks of our lives. The productive pursuits of one's career are lifelong. Education requires the training and development of all our capacities. And play, too, is something that reflects universal human needs and is something that brings to bear broad uses of human capacities. Play in some form or another exists across all human cultures and in the animal kingdom as well. Last night on Facebook, there was going around these ducks going up and down a slide. I don't know if anyone saw that. It seemed to be making the rounds. And so this suggests that the needs of play that play fulfills are universal. And as I have described it, play is an activity that can meet, at least partially, the needs for agency, for feelings of power and mastery, and for meaning and purpose. Play also allows us to create pleasurable experiences for ourselves and with others, another seemingly universal human need. Play requires, as I've already argued, the use of reasoning and intellectual capacities. Much of play involves others, so it calls forth the development of social skills and abilities. Lots of play is physical, so it's focused on physical and motor abilities. This is one of the reasons for the near universal attraction of sports and athletics. It's a kind of play that depends on all these skills and capacities together at once. The intellectual, the physical, the motor, the social, all have to be highly developed to succeed and excel in sport. Lastly, play is something that humans do throughout their lives. We obviously play a lot when we are children, but play also continues into adulthood. And this is not just a feature of Western modern life. Games like Mancala, I'm not sure if I'm saying that, Mancala and chess have ancient histories. Herodotus tells us of how the adult Lydians engaged in games of various kinds. There's a long history in most cultures of gambling and games of chance. And we can't leave off the important role of athletic games in the ancient world. In this way, play is something that fits the model of an important spiritual value. It's more than just something on the peripheral that one might engage in just as a break for the things in life that really count. It exercises many of our human capacities in pleasurable ways and does so in ways that help us to value the cardinal values. So depending on the individual, play seems like something that we ought to incorporate to varying degrees into the regular pattern and flow of our lives. Now, as I've said, many scholars think that play must be autotelic, that the exercise of any external or instrumental purposes undermine, even disqualify the activity as play. This is a mistake, and one I want to bring up here, because in any attempt to understand the values in objectivism, I think we need to reject a common dichotomy between the idea that a value is either autotelic, an end in itself, or it is instrumental, a value only in respect to what it brings about. Now, in a sense, objectivism says that only life is a value in itself and that all other values are instrumental to life. But I think this is somewhat misleading. Instrumentality suggests that the instrumental value really is no value at all. It merely brings about the real value. This doesn't capture the sense of value in objectivism. The cardinal values and all the other values we pursue and work for in our lives are really values. They are values because of the role they play in our lives, but they are nevertheless real values. Now, the autotelic instrumental dichotomy is an instance, I think, of the intrinsic subjective dichotomy. The intrinsic view is that value is really there and is a value in itself. The subjective view is that there are no real values. Subjectivism denies that there's anything that can be a value in itself, and so there are no actual values in the world. Objectivism rejects that values are real values only if they are values in themselves. According to objectivism, value is objective. It is a function of real human needs and how our activities in the world fulfill these needs for the purposes of living our lives. A value is always a value to someone for some reason. Now, in this way, autotelicity is not a useful or meaningful category for particular human activities or values. It really only makes sense when talking about the whole process of living and valuing. Applying the concept to particular activities makes for some bizarre results. Bernard Suits, the philosopher who wrote the seminal work on games called The Grasshopper, provides in a different work, which is just an article, so it doesn't have a cool picture of it, so that's why I went with this. It provides a fictionalized example of a Roman private called Glutius Maximus who contemplates God as an end in itself. And this is presented in Suits' paper as a clear and unproblematic case of autotelicity. Maximus says, quote, "Contemplating God is not good for anything. It is a good in itself." He explains to his sergeant that he gains nothing from the activity and that it provides him with no benefit or advantage. That's part of what it means for it to be autotelic. And though Suits takes this as a clear case of pure autotelic activity, I take it as a reductio, as a reduction to absurdity. Even if there were a God to contemplate, Maximus' explanation of his activity makes no sense. It's far-fetched to imagine one engaging intensely, or even casually, in an activity that they explicitly recognize has no benefit, no advantage, no point. If Maximus' activity was truly devoid of benefit, advantage, or purpose, there's no way to make sense of Maximus' motivation. More than that, there's really no sense to make sense. There's no way to make sense of his activity as being something that is good. Thinking of any activity, play, work, contemplation of the divine, I think as autotelic, drains the activity of its meaning and substance. It makes it impossible to be motivated to engage in the activity, since, ex hypothesis, the activity is not something with any benefit, advantage, or purpose. It separates value from its teleological structure. Value makes no sense without being connected to the ultimate end. But nor should we think of all these activities as just instrumental. That too drains the activity of its meaning and substance, placing these entirely into something else. These activities have meaning, substance, and purpose within the living of our lives. And our lives are not distinct or severable from these various activities. Our lives in these activities only make sense together. Now, so in rejecting this dichotomy of instrumentality versus autotelicity, we also reject the idea that play must not have any external purposes. This opens the door for discussion of play as something productive. Now, usually, when we talk about productivity, we are focused on the production of material goods, material values. But productivity can also be understood more broadly as activities that bring into existence values more generally. Material goods are an important class of values for humans, but there are other kinds of values, such as psychological, spiritual, and social values. These need to be produced as well. Once we are not rationalistically stuck to the idea of play as autotelic, we can recognize that play can be productive of many kinds of values. Most often, we are producing social or spiritual values by play, deepening bonds of friendship, experiencing the joy of accomplishing a goal, a sense of efficacy from a successful physical movement. Some of the ways we play are part of fitness activities, playing racquetball or competing in half marathons. The primary goal of these activities is the playfulness of the activity itself, not the health values, but these are produced by it nonetheless. There are also many ways that play can be a part of the production of material values. Often in creative professions, play has important roles in the process. It can help to open up creativity and encourage spontaneity. I think that's why Google does what it does in its environment. Play is often used in the work environment for team building, creating an esprit de corps among employees. Now, not all work is exciting and interesting, right? I'm sure we can all recognize that. It can often be tedious or boring. Play is a way to turn these potential negative experiences into positive ones. Maybe one pretends he's an undercover agent on a stakeout when he's really just stocking shelves at Walgreens. I used to do that. Or she makes a game out of seeing how quickly and effectively she can fill the boxes of chocolates for an order. Now, in these examples, play is not a necessary component of the productive process or directly involved in bringing the values into existence. Nevertheless, by inspiring creativity, building morale, or making it fun, play can make the work environment more productive and effective. In this way, it's an important part of productivity. In her book, Reality is Broken, Jane McGonigal discusses many ways that games can help make life better. She points to the gamification of education as a way of improving engagement and in the results of education. She also tells of a game playing as helping scientists figure out the folding of proteins, a very complex, tedious process that takes a long time. But they've developed this game called Fold It, which is a computer puzzle game which speeds up the process tremendously in figuring out the folds. And the gamers work at folding proteins and discovering which patterns are most stable and most successful. So these two examples are gamification and Fold It are ways that play is more directly involved in the production of real values in education and science. Now, my goal today was to show that play has more value to us than merely being a pause to keep us going. It's not a leftover for when more important work is completed. It's not something that we just leave behind in childhood. Play is an activity that reinforces and reaffirms the cardinal values of reason, purpose, and self. Play helps to create many of the material, social, and spiritual values in our lives. Most importantly, play provides happiness and joy in one's life. As Rand wrote in her journals, I'm good, and if this thing has given me enjoyment, then it is good. Thank you. So, have some time for questions.
It's Walter Donway.
Yes.
It's very interesting because almost everything you say about play applies to art. Mm-hmm. You didn't mention the word art once. I was waiting, but
I mentioned it once as one of the spiritual.
Oh, did you?
So.
Okay, because a kind of end in itself. Mm-hmm. All the rest of it. There is one other example of play in Ayn Rand, which is when Karen Andre has her platinum chainmail and gets her servant to heat it up and puts it on when she's nude. I assume that's kind of play.
I don't remember that. I feel like I would remember that.
That was the night of January 16th.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's been a long time since I read that.
Well, yeah.
Okay.
Ayn Rand didn't much believe in play. In fact, when you look at how Rourke takes Dominic and Gall takes Agnes, I don't even know if she believed in foreplay.
I'm just going to leave that and go to Jackie. Yeah.
Your talk was very positive. I liked it. But I wanted to say, my husband, who you know, doesn't like to play games. And when I asked him, why do you not like to play games? He says, well, because somebody loses when you play a game. And he doesn't like to lose, and he doesn't like the idea of someone else losing either. So he doesn't like to play games. Would you comment on that?
Sure. Well, I mean, that's fine insofar as it goes, although not all play in games involves a zero-sum competition. All right. I mentioned one game, SimCity. You can't really. Well, I guess you can lose at SimCity if you go bankrupt, but it's not a competitive zero-sum thing. You play the game and you can come back from bankruptcy. If you play Sudoku, you don't. That's not really a win or loss, right?
But a lot of games.
Yes, no, a lot of games are going to be more competitive and intense and can be in themselves zero-sum. And if one doesn't like that, I don't think that's a problem. But I think there are a lot of other games and other things and other ways of play. And I think to go back to Walter's point, I mean, art can be playful. Right? There's other ways that you can engage in play more broadly that isn't the construct of a game that's competitive, but can just involve that extraordinary activity, some arbitrary conditions that you step into that you accept for the purposes of having some fun. And it could be that going to the firing range, something I know that Lyman likes to do, is a kind of play, right? I mean, you can be treating it as practice, but it also could just be, it's fun, because it's exciting, right? You know, arbitrary constraints, right? It's 200 feet, 300 yards, whatever, right? And there's how long you can shoot for before there's a respite from that while people reload and so on. So it can ebb and flow like a game or like play as well. So he might not realize it, but he might be playing.
Hello, Shawn. Thank you so much for making such an elegant case for my life's work.
Thank you.
I'm the one with the puzzles downstairs.
Oh, great.
And I've done it for 35 years. I invite you all to take a closer look because they're not purposeless. They do, in fact, build efficacy. Mm-hmm. And I came to this work, and it's more a comment than a question, but I mentioned the reason kids like play, it's a natural way for them to simulate what they're learning about life in a less threatening environment. When we play games in sports, these all are symbolic. They're microcosms of things that in a larger context could be deadly. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, you're playing chess, you are creating regime change, you're overthrowing another country. It might well be, the story goes, that chess was created as an alternative to all the people going out and physically killing each other, and then whoever won the game, the others would just surrender and can say, yes, you won, instead of having to kill all those people.
That would be a much better way to do it, yeah.
Yes. And so games are microcosms, sports particularly, because you have opposing teams, but by doing it in a playful way, nobody really gets hurt in the long run. People don't like to play games of winners and losers because they emotionalize the results as though it were something real, and so their self-esteem takes a big crash on it.
Well, one of the nice things about, and kind of going back to that point too about winners and losers, is that the game's over and you can start again and you have another chance at it.
That's right.
So you might lose this game, but then you
play again.
You play again, and you can win a different game. And you can adjust the skill level. You can play with someone differently, or someone who's at more your level of skill, right? I mean, I can go and play tennis with somebody, and they can just destroy me, or I can go and find someone who's just learning how to play the game, and I can destroy them. Right? No. But it's, and so it gives you an opportunity to actually experience winning in a safe environment.
There's this nice book about the Zen aspect of playing tennis, where the player was always afraid of doing his best because he did not want to defeat the opponent, make him feel bad, until he realized he's not doing justice to the opponent by playing less than his best because the opponent is not getting a chance to improve.
Right.
So by reasoning it that way, he then was able to go out and play tennis.
Right, and matching best to best makes it enjoyable for both as
and
well.
My slogan is for the joy of thinking. So thank you for mentioning joy. Yeah. And it's called Playable Art, the playable art of Kate Jones.
Okay.
Because they are art, and I'll stop promoting at this point.
All right, thank you. So
please come and see them. They are for sale.
All right, so do we have time for both Will and Carrie Ann?
Yes.
Yeah, good.
We have.
I just wanted one comment on that, and then was that you said that the reason why children like to play, and I think you're right, although I think that's more of an external explanation. I think the reason why children like to play is because it's fun, right? And it has all these other benefits, but I think while they're playing, my son, he's engaged in this puzzle, he's learning this. Yes, he is. But why is he doing it? He's doing it because it's fun and interesting. And I think that's part of the brilliance of Montessori as well, because it recognizes that.
Thanks for bringing that up, Shawn. That's a nice segue to my question,
Oh,
which is an attempt to rescue the autotelic, which you will laugh at, I think, since I loved your objectivist deconstruction of the way people usually use that term. Really. And I loved your presentation.
Thank you.
But the autotelic. So people, the thing is that we think there's something different between when you go out with your friend and toss a football around and when the pros go out to play in the stadium or they're on strike because the salary wasn't high enough. Right? There's something different going on. Mm-hmm. And this is sort of the difference between, say, the work colleagues you get along with, because you're paid to be there, and they're okay, they're good in the work context, from your friends, where you don't get paid, and you're there for the spiritual values you get from the friend itself. And so I just wanted to suggest an idea for rescuing the autotelic, mm-hmm. maybe there's a distinction in the classes of values at stake. I mean, if there's something real here that mm-hmm. this botched up concept was trying to get at,
right.
then maybe it's what are the values at stake. For instance, you were just saying that your son plays because it's fun. Mm-hmm. And joy is a direct experience. You get something, and it's a component of your happiness. So maybe, I just want to suggest, what do you think of the idea that when one is doing something for the direct sake of the joy it provides you, that's a meaningful difference between something one is doing for some subordinate end that one will get back. So the difference between doing something to earn money that one will use, mm-hmm. more instrumental, playing the game because it's fun.
Yeah.
Again, it's not that it is an end in itself, but that the value at stake is more directly connected to your happiness as such.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that there is a way to use end in itself kind of verbiage in a more metaphoric or non-literal sense, as Rand does, right? See if I can get there quickly.
Well, in Rand,
Rand certainly doesn't think that joy is the end in itself. Life is the only, but she qualifies it, metaphysical end in itself. And I think one of the problems, at least in the philosophical literature, when they talk about this, is that they're treating it as metaphysical ends in itself. And I think that's the mistake. We certainly experience play and other kinds of things, art, and other kinds of friendship as ends in themselves to us as values, I think, or at a value level. They're not, but metaphysically, they're not ends in themselves. So I think there is a very real way in which there's a felt experience of the values that's different than the metaphysical layout of values.
Thanks.
Hi, and actually, that exchange actually perfectly set up my question.
Wonderful. I love when it works like that.
Which has to do with developing the philosophical language and distinctions to get at what's going on here in terms of value theory. A term that hasn't been used yet is constitutive value, because life is the ultimate value. In order that it's not a floating abstraction, mm-hmm. is that you live it concretely as an embodied being. Yeah. And I think the simulation of that experience that Will was talking about through playfulness, he does it because it's fun. It gives him reason to live before he thinks about reasons for living. Yeah. And so hopefully, ideally, you transfer that experience texture of life through this constitutive element of what life is for you as an embodied being to what you choose as your vocation, what draws you, and that same love of your embodied existence will pull you through all of your life. And so I think that maybe constitutive value, if you don't like the end in itself because it sounds too intrinsicist, would that be a helpful suggestion, or is that a way that might helpfully unpack what you're getting at?
Absolutely, and in some of more technical versions of this talk, I've used that, because I think to use that term, you have to do a little bit of some of the Aristotelian groundwork to put that out there. The distinction that he draws between kind of the ultimate end, constitutive values, and instrumental values, and so I love the idea of constitutive values. So I think that's it, right?
That's it.
All right. Thank you.